I've never been to Australia, but I have read that it's home to some of the deadliest animals on the planet, and that sheep outnumber humans 3 to 1. Is that why many things set in Australia envision it as a post-apocalyptic wasteland? Or is it just because of Officer Maxwell Rockatansky?
Warrior of the road.
Either way, today we're going to discuss Waste Knights, designed by Marek Maidel and Paweł Zuk, probably messed up their name, so I apologize for that, and published by Galacta Games. And guess what? It takes place in a post-apocalyptic Australia, so there was a point to that introduction. Picture this. You're a rugged hero, traveling the wasteland. You're a rugged hero, traveling the wasteland, facing unnatural weather and enemies forged in long-forgotten laboratories, as well as experiencing adventures full of dramatic choices and disturbing characters. Sounds awesome, right? Well, it is. The gameplay is challenging, the story is engaging, and the combat is quick. I've already done a what's in the box, but the focus on that video was the retail edition. I managed to get my hands on a Kickstarter version, and in today's video, I wanted to discuss the differences between the retail version and the Kickstarter version. Now, the Kickstarter version might be harder for you to get your hands on, but it's still out there and you could probably find a used copy like I did. Waste Knights is an adventure and exploration game that sees your character heading out into the wasteland to accomplish a certain set of goals. You have multiple characters you could choose from, each of which has a different set of skills. There's cool vehicles you get to ride, tons of weapons and items you can find and use to either destroy or befriend anything you come in contact with. And each scenario plays out with a choose-your-own-adventure type storybook. The retail version just recently hit shops. This is also the second edition. The first edition was released in 2015. It had a modular board and no storybook component or solo rule set, but similar theme and similar gameplay mechanics. I have the retail version and the Kickstarter edition. Right off the bat, you can see the box for the Kickstarter version is a bit deeper. There's more going on inside of this box. But even just on the cover, the retail version has a tagline, a post-apocalyptic game of adventure and survival in ruined Australia. It also has the Galacta logo and the names of the two designers above the Waste Knights logo. The image is identical, though on the Kickstarter edition, the motorcycle and the character kind of have a gloss on top of them. Everything else is pretty much the same, though there is a different finish on the retail edition. You should check out the what's in the box for the retail version because it shows you exactly what this looks like when you first open it. So it's not going to look like what it would look like if you just opened it fresh. But let's open up both. And the majority of the components are actually identical, but there's a few extra things that are going to be in the Kickstarter edition. And I want to talk about those today to show you exactly what's different and I guess value-wise, if it's really worth tracking down one of these Kickstarter versions. I had originally picked this up in retail and then a week later saw someone selling the Kickstarter version for almost the same price. So I picked it up and I wanted to do a comparison. Now I'm not going to hold on to both of these. I will probably sell either both or just the retail version and keep my hands on the Kickstarter version. But one thing I wanted to do was I wanted to show the difference between a Kickstarter and a retail version when they come out. And so sometimes they're actually identical. With a game like Excavation Earth, the Kickstarter and the retail version are the exact same thing. You only just don't get an extra set of, I think, 10 tiles. But all of the stretch goals are in the retail version of that game. Now with Waste Knights, there's a lot of similar components in here. The Kickstarter edition just gives you a few extra things. Here we just have the token bag, some of our character sheets. I printed out the back page and we get to the rule book. In the Kickstarter edition, there's this Kickstarter guide that actually explains all of the additional content for the Kickstarter. But before we go into that, I want to show you that the rule books are actually identical. Exactly the same. In the Kickstarter, there's this additional little booklet about an upcoming game, The Shadow Planet, from Galacta Games. There's the lore guide. This was a Kickstarter exclusive. Has artwork and story elements. That's the lore guide. And now, back to the Kickstarter guide, you could see we have the lore guide, some adventure cards, 3 more knight figures, 3 more knight sheets, 12 personal upgrade cards, 8 adventure cards, 2 vehicle sheets, some entry tokens, 5 more wasteland cards for the desert and highway, 3 more for the scrub and mountains, 5 gear cards. So it's actually not that much extra stuff component-wise, but I think the add-ons that are probably the most interesting are the extra scenarios that come in the Kickstarter. So the token sheets, this token sheet, this is the card holder. These are identical. You can see they have a numbering WK 1, 2, and 3. These, well, here, let's see if I can hold them all at the same time. These 3 sheets, these come in the retail version as well as the Kickstarter, and they are identical. This sheet is extra. It also has 2 missing elements, and I think those are already punched and included further below. But this is an extra Kickstarter sheet. It comes with some tokens that are required for one of the extra scenarios. The board itself is identical. Same quality, same artwork. And here we have the Book of Tales. So let's find it in here. The Book of Tales. So same artwork on the cover. Kickstarter version, way thicker. So the Book of Tales for the retail version is 144 pages. Book of Tales from the Kickstarter edition, 240. Quite a bit larger. The guide, they look about the same, but I do know the Kickstarter version has those extra scenarios in here. In the retail guide, the last scenario is Sunken Treasures. But in the Kickstarter edition, there's an extra scenario at the end. After Sunken Treasures, we have Rise of the Red Lord is a 2 to 4 player scenario. To play it solo, you just have to play 2 characters. That is the extra scenario in the Kickstarter. Kickstarter edition has 4 extra characters you could play. They also come with minis. I'll show you those in a second. So there's Dr. Fang, Scientist, Jenny Burns, Huntress, Reverend Evans, Priest, Mr. Maul, Scavenger. And then the same characters that come in the retail version. Component-wise, they both have the little token bag, same number of dice, same number of ammo, health, and gas components. There's, of course, some few extra gear cards, few extra exploration cards. And let's see, I think there's some extra vehicle cards as well. Sand, buggy, bike, off-road. Oh, you have Harry the Camel. These here are some of the extra cards you get. They're separated in a Ziploc bag. So these will be the extra exploration cards for the different map tiles. Possibly also if you have certain encounters for specific scenarios. Quality-wise, cards, components, they're exactly the same. Even insert-wise, it's almost the identical insert, it's just deeper. These are some of the extra items that come in the Kickstarter. Oh, these are actually the items and upgrades for each of the additional characters that come in the Kickstarter. And then here is a tray of all of the extra minis. So there's 5 extra minis. 4 are playable characters, and I think 1 is the final boss in that last scenario. And then the tray for the original minis is exactly the same. And like I said, component-wise, the dice, here we could get a close-up of both bags, identical. Cardboard tokens are exactly the same. The sheets are actually exactly the same as well. So when it comes down to it, if you're taking a look at the retail and the Kickstarter, if you want to get as many scenarios as possible, that extra scenario I do believe is about 2 hours. Yep, so 2 hours more of gameplay plus all of the variations in there. Since there's over 100 more pages in the Book of Tales, obviously there's a lot more variation for each of the stories as well. Different ways that you can go. Most likely because of the extra characters that come in the Kickstarter. Cost-wise, if you had originally kickstarted this game, it probably would have cost you about $100. The retail version is between $80 and $90. So they're pretty close in comparison. And the retail does give you almost 80 to 90% of what comes in the Kickstarter. But the few extra vehicles, the extra characters you can play, and that final scenario does kind of tip it over the edge with the amount of stuff you get. But if you can't get your hands on the Kickstarter edition, the retail version does have tons of gameplay. And it's pretty much exactly the same game, except for that one scenario and the extra characters. If you're a completionist, when the Kickstarter launched, there was also some expansions that you can get. This is just the basic core box from the Kickstarter, which included the stretch goals. The expansions, as far as I know, are not available in retail. Further down the road, they may be. But for now, the only way to get those expansions is to find somebody selling the Kickstarter with that kind of higher pledge that had all the expansions included. So let's take a look at close-ups for each of these minis, and I'll read a little bit about them. Jenny Burns, the Huntress. For Jenny Burns, the word backwater is a synonym for home. She spent most of her life in the outback, learning about plants and beasts and whatever lived around her parents' farm. Reverend Evans. Some people say that God has forsaken humanity, so they do abominable things, caring not for heaven or hell. Others look for a higher meaning in experimental drugs or among strange cults that have cropped up around Australia after the scourge. Mr. Mall, Scavenger. Where others see garbage, he sees profit. When others think a hard day's work is for losers, he rolls up his sleeves and starts to rummage in yet another pile of junk. He's called Mr. Mall, and that's exactly what he is, a living icon of the bygone era of consumerism. Dr. Feng, Scientist. For Dr. Feng, the waste is just an immense laboratory, a testing ground for his crazy theories, ones that in good old times would have guaranteed a long prison time. But now, with all the choking constraints of morality gone, a true scientist can finally expand the boundaries of human knowledge. Now that I've gone in and shown you the difference between the retail version and the Kickstarter version, the next video I want to do is a gameplay comparison between Waste Knights and Post-Human Saga. I find they're two similar games with similar themes and actually similar rule sets as well. Both games have similar combat, similar exploration, and slight differences, so I actually want to talk about kind of which one does it better. So I got to get a couple more games of Waste Knights in. I've played tons of games of Post-Human Saga, but I need to play a few more games of Waste Knights so I could get a better idea of the pros and the cons of each game, and in the end, which game I think I'm going to keep in my collection. So be sure to check back on the channel for that video. It should be coming out in the next month or so. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of the differences between the Kickstarter version and the retail version of Waste Knights. As you can see, not much that's different, though more story elements, more playable characters in the Kickstarter release. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. But thanks a lot for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed yourself, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy.